All right, y'all. So we're going to take a quick look at a couple videos from the Hill today. It's an outfit that we affectionately refer to as the SHill. Not because of Kim, obviously, but because of basically just the controlled opposition positioning of the entire channel itself. I do think that they cover some good stories. Obviously, they cover some stories that the mainstream quote-unquote media, which they would claim to not be a part of, kind of doesn't cover. However, my main gripe with The Hill isn't even so much with Robbie and Ryan personally as much as it is just with the kind of the role that they play there. And I think that they're just kind of doing their job, so to speak. But I think that The Hill serves as a controlled opposition outlet because they frame some of these issues that the mainstream media is not willing to discuss. They frame it within the left-right paradigm, which, in my opinion, is just a little bit defunct. So there are videos that they have where there's very little to take issue with. But there are other times. Honestly, mostly it has to do with contributors that they bring on the show. They've got this habit of bringing on contributors that either refuse to discuss the issue at hand, or more often are just, it's like they bring on progressives to deliver the progressive ideological, line and position, while kind of disparaging the left-right paradigm. And I think the left-right paradigm is obsolete. However, when people, claim to discuss kind of issues that are outside the mainstream, but they constantly frame them within the left-right paradigm. For instance, on the Hill, you'll constantly hear them talking about how, they'll talk, here's a good example. They'll talk about trans issues and trans kids, for instance, and I say that without even getting into the giant long tangent that is that issue, but they'll talk about that issue in a way that the mainstream media won't, but they will frame any opposition to hormone therapy or gender affirmation therapy for children as an initiative solely from Republicans, and they'll say the word Republican or right-wing 10 times during a segment, 5 times at least, to seemingly hammer in the point subliminally that, this needs to be associated with Republicans. And even when it's someone who is, like myself, a capital L liberal, really my primary concern is liberal values and individual rights. I oppose those things, and so when they're constantly framing it as a Republican initiative or concern, it just sets off some of my bullshit sensors. So we're going to take a look here at a video I have not watched. I haven't watched either one of these. So again, like I said, there's some videos that are all good, but it'll be interesting to see how they frame this issue. So we're going to take a look at one about Eric Adams addressing homeless encampments as rent skyrockets to record highs in New York City.
Days. However, of those displaced, only 5 people agreed to seek new housing at a shelter.
The new mayor's push to, quote, keep New Yorkers safe and our streets clean started earlier this year when police similarly began clearing out homeless people sheltering in the subway system. Gothamist reports that roughly 48,000 people live in New York City shelters compared to 2,400 living on the streets. Last year, 640 people died while homeless in New York City, the highest number of deaths recorded since tracking began in 2006 when 162 deaths were reported. Drug-related deaths were the leading cause, spiking 81% from 2020. Our rising panel joins us now to weigh in. Alayemi Alurn is a New York...
Okay, so this is about as perfect as we could possibly hope for this to get, all right? So this chick on the left, he just said her name, and I'm pretty sure, and I can't remember it. This is one of the most ethno-narcissistic people I've maybe ever seen. And it'll be interesting to see how far she gets into her response before mentioning race. It could happen that she doesn't mention it, but the chances of this segment finishing without her mentioning a disproportionate rate of homelessness for non-white people, or some version of some stat related to that, is slim to none. So let's take a look here.
City public defender for legal aid and political commentator, and Amy Tarkanian is a Republican strategist and former chairwoman of the Nevada State GOP. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Yeah, so, no big deal.
What's up, guys?
Just one second, we'll get past this ad.
In the mail right here.
It's not a big deal, No, like I was saying, it's about the contributors. One of the contributors is she's a progressive ideologue, but she's a public defender, and that lets you know just about all you need to know. She's a public defender, and the other person representing, she's going to represent the common sense line of addressing homelessness, but they're going to refer to her as a Republican strategist. That's what they do. They do that constantly to just poison the well of what those people have to say. Not from me, I'll listen to what they have to say, obviously, but there's definitely a subset of people who hear, oh, well, that's a Republican strategist, so whatever she says, it's going to come out of her mouth. Whatever comes out of her mouth is, fucking heresy. So
Alaimi, I see problems often in the approach to, obviously we want to find the homeless population shelters, get them into safer environments. But practically, isn't it a really Herculean task to accomplish that, given how resistant many of them are to entering shelters or other kinds of accommodations?
All right. So his question is, he starts off acknowledging that homelessness is an issue, and then he basically his only request of this contributor is that she acknowledge difficulties getting some homeless people to engage with helpful programs. So see what she has to say.
It's not just that they're resistant, it's that they're not able to. Beyond the fact that many of the shelters are completely full, they have stringent requirements that leave the homeless people unable to stay there. They tend to need mailing addresses and all kinds of different requirements that a homeless person is not going to have. Need several visits, an entire interview process, and it takes months for them to get into the shelter. So imagine trying to keep in contact with people who are literally leaving in the street and expecting them to jump through all these hurdles. Additionally, they lose trust in the system, right? The Department of Homeless Services.
Anytime someone says right as a part of their argument, like at the end of a sentence to just emphasize a point that they may or may not have been making, instant red flags. I've never heard anybody who makes convincing arguments say, right, at the end of every sentence. That's classic Young Turks bullshit.
Believe it or not, has been advised never to provide them with basic necessities like socks and food and blankets, because the statement is that it'll discourage them from seeking shelter. But what it really does is discourage their trust and faith in the system to even enter the shelters, on top of the fact that the people who are in the shelters are subjected to violence, sexual assault, being arrested by NYPD and funneled in and out of the system. But what's important for me is...
So they can get arrested at a shelter. Do they get arrested at the shelter automatically just for being there? Or are they doing something illegal that leads to them being arrested? I can understand why this is a reason why someone... It makes sense to bring this up in a conversation about why someone wouldn't want to engage with a shelter or some of the programs that they have for the homeless in New York or other cities. But the framing on this shit is just constantly delegitimizing law enforcement and just any semblance of an order-based society. And, saying, oh, well, the NYPD arrest them at shelters? For them to say that without recognizing that, it's like, yeah, they will arrest a homeless person at a shelter if that homeless person has been doing something illegal. At least, most of the time, hopefully. But it's just interesting to bring that up as like a blanket, just kind of throwaway, diss. This girl's fucking clearly a huge Dragon Ball Z fan, by the way.
Eric Adams doesn't seem to understand that homeless people are New Yorkers and he is responsible for their well-being too. Since he's taken office, he's been committed against waging war against them. The first thing he did was line the subway stations with more NYPD officers to forcibly remove homeless people from the stations, thus forcing them onto the street. And now he's destroying these.
So this lady says, oh, well, the first thing Eric Adams did is, put more police officers in the subway stations to bother homeless people. Let's just do a quick Google search. Hopefully this doesn't get outside the frame of the recording window here, but we'll do a quick Google search, and we're going to see if we can find any reason why Eric Adams might have stationed more police at the subway stations. Let's check it out. Let's type in woman pushed into subway by homeless man. Oh shit. Woman pushed in front of subway, killed in Times Square. Man arrested after pushing woman onto subway tracks in Manhattan. This is 2 months ago, and this one's 1 year ago. Let's see here. The man, look at this. See? Look at this. This is exactly, the window of recording is a little bit too small, so I'm going to have to go back and forth. But this is the first thing that comes up. This is the first thing that comes up. The first fucking thing. When you Google, well, obviously it comes up when you Google the exact search terms because you know what you're looking for. But look, the homeless man. This is from 10 fucking days ago. The homeless man who admitted to fatally shoving Michelle Go into an oncoming train station, blah, blah, blah. So he's going to be unfit to stand trial, the court says. So this fucking guy murders this lady for no fucking reason, okay? No fucking reason. None. And this is the reaction you get from public defenders, by the way. So this lady is literally the person who would sit in a courtroom and who would try to diminish the culpability for this fucking murder because this dude is homeless. And it's totally important to recognize that homeless people obviously deal extremely disproportionately with mental health issues. Oftentimes that's why they're homeless in the first place. But you're ignoring objective reality when you criticize the mayor, who, and by the way, the mayor is a fucking stupid piece of shit who's not going to help New York at all and doesn't deserve to be in office. He's in office because he's a fucking black dude who used to be a cop, okay? That's why he's in office. They should call him Mayor Eric the Black Cop Adams, because without those two things, his skin color and his law enforcement experience, this dude wouldn't be the fucking mayor. But yeah, so, just for the record, it's not hard to figure out. And I mean, I don't know who the fuck chose this picture, obviously, unless maybe that's a face he made during his perp walk or something like that. But this is from 10 fucking days ago, and the attack, I think, happened last month at some point, maybe February. And this lady, you just heard her say, let's go back and watch. She's going to say, he's putting this fucking Dragon Ball Z nerd. Look at this shit. He's a fucking adult. This lady's a fucking lawyer. This lady's trying to keep people out of fucking jail for the rest of their lives, potentially. And she's fucking got Dragon Ball Z posters in the back of her little recording setup here. So anyways, let's listen real quick again to what she had to say about Eric Adams putting cops in the subway.
He is responsible for their well-being too. Since he's taken office, he's been committed against waging war against them. The first thing
she calls it waging war against the homeless people. She says for this particular segment, we're firmly on the side of Eric Adams while acknowledging that he's a piece of shit ideologue who's not going to do anything meaningful. But the idea that he's waging war against homeless people, notice the violent undertones of the rhetoric. So what's more of an act of war? Putting cops in the subway? Or fatally shoving a woman into a subway train? So fuck this lady. Like I said, she's a fucking gross ideologue. And the issue with the SHill, and the reason why I'm making these segments, I've been in the comments of the SHill here for a few weeks now, noticing the bullshit kind of pattern and way that they treat stories. But what you got to notice here is just how gross this is.
Was line the subway stations with more NYPD.
He lined the subway stations with more NYPD officers. I wonder why.
Officers to forcibly remove homeless people from the stations, thus forcing them onto the street. And now he's destroying these encampments, which will leave them physically displaced. So it's not just that people aren't accepting shelter, it's that it's not an option, which is something he knows, because he says, oh, he can't force people in the shelters. They legally can't do that. Oh, there's a system in place, but he won't leave the encampment. So he's taking them out of the subways. He's taking them off the streets. So where do they go?
All right, so let's hear what kind of pushback they get. Now, it's so inconsistent. There's the small chance here. If the only person that's going to give meaningful pushback here, this is why this show is fucking bullshit, and this is why it's controlled opposition. Like I said, I haven't watched this clip, but we were right assuming that this lady was going to say some dumb bullshit. So let's make some predictions for the rest of the clip here. Ryan and Robbie are not notice this is not a skit. I don't know if this skit. This is not a segment where they're going to have Kim involved, all right? They can't have Kim involved in segments where it's too difficult to ignore objective reality. Okay? Kim isn't willing to ignore objective reality like Robbie and Ryan are. And so she doesn't get to participate in these segments. So if anybody gives any meaningful pushback to this, it's going to be this other panelist, this other guest panelist. And she's already been framed as a former Republican strategist. So let's see how this goes.
And Amy, do as Republicans are kind of...
I mean, should I keep going? Or, listen to this shit. That's unbelievable. First thing he says is Republicans, after saying her name. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's predictable. And it's fucking garbage. The Hill is trash.
So where do they go?
And Amy, do as Republicans are kind of can also
go.
And Amy,
as
Republicans are kind of also confronting this crisis, how are they responding? Is it purely like cops need more funding, or is there some grappling within the Republican Party, Republican coalition, of how to actually resolve some of these problems kind of more structurally?
Well, the majority of the...
So notice, just, I don't want to harp on this, but this is kind of the whole point of the video. Notice we've completely moved on past the other woman's comments about lining the subway with homeless people. So they did not bring up... Robbie and Ryan are aware of the story of the homeless woman being pushed in front of the train. They know that happened. Neither one of them pushed back at all. And as they set this woman up to maybe push back on that particular part, I'm not sure if she will, their handoff to her, the segue, is 100% framed around the idea of her being a Republican strategist.
Republicans that I have spoken to in regards to this topic is pretty similar.
Honestly, at this point, if you hear somebody saying Republicans and Democrats, just fucking disregard most of what they have to say, or at least be skeptical of it. They're probably on some bullshit, and they're not aware of the goals and agenda of the political establishment. And they have been successfully, for lack of a better term, they've been successfully brainwashed or indoctrinated into the left-right political paradigm. And people need to get more familiar with the political compass as opposed to the political spectrum. Both ideas are attempts to articulate what is an abstract concept, the range of combinations of political positions that a person can hold is very abstract. It's the type of thing where obviously, you can look at, if you have enough of a sample size of people speaking, you can find them holding a contradictory position 100% of the time, for the most part. And so, at I'm sorry. Let's just go back to this here.
And I think actually would be across the board, despite party affiliation, is
My bad. To finish that point, the political compass also has its limitations, but as an abstract concept, it's more useful than the political spectrum. So the spectrum is just left, right, and the compass adds an element of, well, it changes left, right a little bit into, oh fuck, Jesus, I'm just gonna pull it up real quick because we're on a video anyways, and I haven't talked about it in a while. The vertical axis is going to be authoritarianism and libertarianism, and that's kind of the key element of it. So this is the political compass here. I just want to see it. I guess this is their political video.
Hi.
Okay, so they still say left, right actually. So it's left, right. Okay, it's going to be left, right, and then authoritarian, libertarian. And so, figures like Mao or Lenin or Stalin wind up over here, and, some sort of figure that was more of a fascist, like Italy, would be over here. So yeah, some sort of anarchist would be somewhere over here. But anyways, the point is that, the element of authoritarian and libertarian is super important when you're looking at any political outlook. It's important because it lets you know, the left-right tends to philosophically cover policy positions, and the north-south axis of authoritarian versus libertarian basically indicates what someone is willing to do to get those policies in place. There are obviously people who are willing to disregard people's individual rights, etc., and they would be more towards the top of that spectrum there. All right, let's keep going.
Just like she said, homeless people, they're still people. They're still citizens of the area that they reside. And whether if it be under a roof or under a cardboard box roof, they're still human beings. And I don't see a problem with people who are making that choice to be homeless. Because let's be real, there are people who do make that choice. As long as they're not doing drugs, as long as they aren't, sleeping in front of a place of business where you have to, step over, or as long as they're not defecating on the streets, I don't have a problem if that's the way that they choose to live. Here in Nevada, we are actually ranked 9th in the nation for homelessness. And you can actually find, it's really sad, hundreds, if not thousands of people that live in an underground city in the sewage underneath the Las Vegas Strip. And that's also not a way for people to live. And I think what we need to do, and I would hope that Mayor Adams is going to go this route, is put more money maybe towards mental health facilities. And also, just like what she said, my panelist, I used to sit on a board called Lutheran Social Services, and what their goal was to help individuals become citizens once again, that were able to get a job, were able to track down their birth certificate, so that way they can also get an ID, so that way they can learn how to function once again, and hopefully even get off if there is an addiction, or if there's depression or any kind of medical issue that may be needed to attend to. And I think we need to start seeing more of those facilities, but then also compile them maybe all in area, so that way it's like a one-stop shop, because obviously these people don't have transportation unless it's public, so you can't kick them off of public transportation if that's where they're headed.
Well, right, the challenge...
Okay, so we're going to get a little bit of mild pushback here. I'm going to really quickly refill my coffee, but I'm going to be listening to Robbie while he says whatever bullshit he says. Look at Ryan here. See this? Honestly, the Ryan Grimm face, the faces that Ryan makes are one of the main reasons to watch The Hill. Go to any Hill thumbnail and tell me that Ryan doesn't look like he just shit himself. Obviously not here, but it's just funny that they caught him blinking.
Alimi, look, I have become more cognizant of the problems of having an out-of-control homeless population, of tents springing up everywhere of, violent scuffles, confrontations between people who are on drugs or having other problems or having mental illness problems. And in theory, I would support or want to deal with these things in a non-criminal way, in a non-punitive way, in a get resources kind of way. But it seems like a really daunting challenge to get a lot of these people to be on board with those treatment options that a significant number choose. No, they choose the socially undesirable outcome, and then we're just, well, what can we do? I don't know that I'm not persuaded at all that like lack of funding or lack of will is the issue. It's just not working.
I think that this is a popular misconception that homeless people do not want help or resources. First of all, we can't say that it's not a matter of lack of funding, a lack of.
All right, so it's a popular misconception that homeless people don't want help or resources. So there's two kind of contradictory things that you have to balance if you're going to try to tackle homelessness. And the mental health thing is one of them, because whether they're homeless or not, generally, people who are experiencing serious mental health issues don't want help. And even if they do want help deep down, the mental health issues they're experiencing prevent them from pursuing it in a constructive manner. Anybody who has dealt with a friend or family member who's going through a mental health crisis is going to be keenly aware from their experience that going up to that person and saying, hey, you're in a bad spot, you need some help, even if you're someone who that person typically trusts, that can put you in a really bad spot. So, I thought we might get some mild pushback, and we kind of got very tepid pushback from Robbie there. Basically, his only pushback was like, can you explain better, like, what to do? Because, it's just crazy. This lady, they just ignore the relevant factors. It's like saying a cop is supposed to de-escalate things when someone is about to stab someone with a big-ass knife. It's a lot like that. This lady just says there's a misconception that homeless people don't want help. The other panelists had just said that, mental health issues are a major factor. And you could see this other panelist nodding her head as her colleague said that. Yet now here we are, kind of denying that people with mental health issues will be averse to receiving help. It's just interesting.
Sources when in the midst of these large sweeps and getting rid of the encampments and pushing them out of the subway station, they've cut the Department of Homeless Services budget by over $600 million. So clearly there is a deliberate effort here not to provide them with the resources. Again,
see, they cut the homeless services by $600 million. What was the previous number, and were results being achieved? I think the answer to the second question is a definite no, because we've been hearing about the issue skyrocketing. Not just the rent, but the homelessness. The amount of people being pushed in front of trains by homeless people has at least remained steady, if not gone up. So, it's just more fucking hide the ball.
They need. Further, if you actually speak into these outreach groups and the homeless people that are speaking up, because there are many, many homeless advocates like the Homeless Hero in New York City, and they talk about it, they're turned away. There was a woman who lost all of her possessions and where she sleeps when they destroyed the encampments recently. She tried to go to a detox center and she was turned away because they said she needs a mailing address. And that's similar. So they get similar problems trying to get into the shelters. How is a homeless person going to have people are just choosing to do drugs or that they don't want help? They're being turned away actively. So that's what's happening there.
And Amy, I think...
See, one thing that people do, not just this lady, but a lot of people when they're doing news segments like this, these little quick hitters, where they're not expected to explain themselves at length, is they'll hide behind statistics and they'll hide behind majorities and minorities. And I mean that in terms of like the little numbers, depending on when it's convenient. So, she's got this one example of some lady who gets turned away for not having a mailing address. For one thing, I think it's reasonable to assume that, the people who deal with and interact with and have made it probably their life's mission to work with homeless people on the ground, face to face, day after day in a city like New York, where they could be out getting fucking brunch and mimosas, those are probably pretty good people. Some of them are probably ideologues, but I've always had sympathy for homeless people, and I definitely think that there's a lot of people with an instinct to help them when they see them, and if someone chooses to make that a career or a full-time or part-time job, or they volunteer at shelters on weekends or whatever, I think that's admirable. And to kind of assume that they're just fucking, like a patriarchal asshole because they're like participating in the war on drugs because they won't let someone in without a mailing address. Maybe it's been determined by years of work in that industry, very niche industry. Maybe it's been determined that if someone has an address, that can be a foundation for stability in terms of starting up some kind of program to engage with substances less. I'm not sure, but I just wonder if possibly it would just be interesting to hear some pushback on that. Maybe there's a reason.
Obviously, mental health help for people is a good thing, but I think blaming this upsurge in homelessness on mental health, it kind of lacks some. It's not a satisfying explanation because the mental health problems in our country have been, fairly stable over the last several decades. I think.
Actually, I think the key.
Let's see. So the mental health problems have remained fairly stable. So for one, we're getting Ryan pulling a fucking, nebulous, nondescript statistic out of his ass. But here's the thing too, right? So early 80s, or at least sometime during the 80s, they get rid of public mental health facilities. I say they get rid of them. They at least diminish the capacity of them greatly. If the proportion of people experiencing mental illness is more or less constant, let's just say you assume that, because, to a certain extent it does, I think it starts with biological predispositions, and then obviously environmental factors can trigger a bit of a breakdown, or the onset of a severe, psychiatric issue if someone is predisposed. And then obviously things can also happen to people who aren't necessarily predisposed if they experience enough trauma. But yeah, so we get rid of public mental health facilities, at least at a large scale. And now anybody who not wants to, because like we just covered, people don't want help when they're experiencing a mental health crisis most of the time. When people do experience a mental health crisis, in order to engage with, and I've experienced this recently with family, in order to engage with mental health professionals today, law enforcement is the conduit. And there are issues with that. I don't think social workers should be answering 911 calls, but there's an issue in that even when someone is experiencing a severe, and I mean severe psychiatric emergency, if they're an adult, unless they are explicitly threatening to harm themselves or others, there is no intervention that is going to take place. And at least by public officials, and that's a huge issue. People dealing with mental health crises, if they don't receive help, obviously the problem escalates and continues to grow at a near exponential rate and worsen. And so that's a huge issue.
Much worse, especially during the lockdown, even for people who own homes.
Oh, but the point of that was to say, Ryan, the mental health, it's been more or less constant. Yeah, bro, I don't know if you noticed, if the proportion of people with mental health issues remains constant and the population grows, then the number of people with mental health issues will also grow.
Or rent. And so,
But
I do blame
that's where
the
I
fact.
think
Well, I do blame the fact that money is not being put as a priority into facilities that are needed in this area. Because let's go back to Las Vegas. During the lockdown, what was deemed essential? The building of the Allegiant football stadium for the Raiders. Okay, $1.9 billion, and $750 million of that was actually from taxpayer dollars and municipal bonds. So
Now we're talking
when there's a
about
will,
fucking
there's a
sports
way.
stadiums being built with tax money.
No, yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. But
Totally related.
And I think there has been an uptick in kind of mental health problems as a result of the pandemic, but not the types of severe mental health illness that you see on the streets. So I really think it's more about
Kind of another baseless assertion.
just the cost of housing. That's
Just style.
Yes.
That's the thing that has really changed over the last several years. I mean, you know this population a lot more intimately than I do. What's your assessment of what's changed in recent years?
I agree. I think the lockdown is relevant when you think about people losing their jobs, people losing their businesses, people being evicted from their homes. That obviously has a direct correlation.
This is Oliami, or I think they say Olimi most of the time they pronounce it. It's a nice name. Olimi Olerin, and she is a movement lawyer. It'll come up in a second here. You'll see under her name it says movement lawyer. So, interesting. She's a Jacobin is what that means.
On the homeless population. But no, I don't think it's exclusively mental health is to blame. I think it has something to do with the fact that New York City has an astronomical cost of living. Even what we call affordable housing is not affordable. If you actually look at the affordable housing lottery market in New York City, they're more expensive. They are far more expensive, and the income requirements are more expensive than what I as a lawyer currently makes or affords in paying my current rent, let alone homeless people and people that are below the poverty line in New York City. So I think the lockdown is relevant, but not for mental health purposes, but because of poverty. When we think of homelessness, the first thing we should think of is people cannot afford housing.
I mean, I'm just quickly Googling here though. Like DC got 20 million, 19 million in COVID stimulus money to help the homeless. There's a $5 billion program nationwide. There's a $350 million program locally. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on this problem, even just in DC. And it's not, and yet it's more out of control than ever. It's just government incompetence. It's just maybe it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's
disregard.
It's
disregard.
Yeah.
It's disregard.
Yeah.
You know, they've been allowed to perpetuate this myth that, you know, they're trying to protect New Yorkers. And even just saying that, protecting New Yorkers from homeless people excludes them as though they are not New Yorkers themselves. So that is problematic in the first place. But they present.
Woo! So again, we're 10 minutes into a 12-minute segment. We've referred multiple times to, the city protecting New Yorkers from the homeless population in a negative way. No one has fucking acknowledged the murder of Michelle Go, which is just the most recent one. This fucking Rolling Stones fan here with his tongue out pushed this lady in front of a fucking train, okay? No one has fucking acknowledged that. And so this is the criticism of the Hill. This is the criticism of the Hill. This is why I'm starting to make videos about how they're controlled opposition. Shout out Kim Iverson. I think they keep you around so they can claim to not be completely fucking a product of, the political establishment and corporate money. But this is fucking pathetic here. None of them are going to mention the murder of Michelle Go. And they're going to kind of act as if there's some big mystery of why we need to protect New Yorkers from the homeless population.
As though they're protecting New Yorkers. That's why they're ridding homeless people of the street. You're not getting rid of them. They're still there. They have nowhere to be. So you still have homeless people. So what it really is robbing Manhattan and rich New Yorkers of what they deem as an eyesore. Because it's not a coincidence that there are homeless people all around New York City in every borough. But the vast majority of where these sweeps are occurring are in Manhattan. Just like when the pandemic happened and they were housing homeless people in the hotels and the empty, nice, vacant buildings. And then you saw rich Manhattan people rally to have them removed. So this has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers. It have anything to do with safety. It has
Okay, now so we've gone from her not really buying the whole idea of it having to do with impacting New Yorkers and safety to now it has nothing to do with that. This is her statement. Let's go back a few seconds here. She's going to say it's got nothing to do with that. So this woman doesn't even fucking know that lady got murdered.
To have them removed. So this has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers. It have anything to do with safety. It has everything to do with them removed. So this has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers. It have anything to do with safety. Rally to have them removed. So this has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers. It have anything to do with safety. It has rally to have.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna play her clip where she says it has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers and safety. I'm going to play that while we look at the headline and the picture of the lady who got murdered.
Nice vacant buildings, and then you saw rich Manhattan people rally to have them removed. So this has nothing to do with protecting New Yorkers. It have anything to do with safety. It has everything to do with just removing them from our visibility. And additionally, yes, there is millions of dollars being spent, and in other places they get stimulus money. But in New York City, what we're looking at is an over $600 million cut to our homeless services.
Yeah, and
again, she says this $600 million cut. There's billions of dollars being spent on homelessness in New York. Billions of dollars. So the $600 million cut, it just, again, you'll notice she's not gonna, if she wanted to make this point, if the number went from 10 billion to 600 million, or I'm sorry, if the number was $1 billion and they took away 600 million, then she could say they decreased the budget by 60%, and she'd have a point that is, at least has it's at least an actual point. This is just a fucking non-point. This is the talking point. They decreased it by $600 million. Okay, and what's the total budget? Fuck.
Nevada has a surplus, actually, Robbie, now that you're talking about the breakdown of all the money that was divvied out to states. And, we find that homeless people are actually being shuffled from state to state. So then that way you don't have to look at them, or else the money's being used to put dividers on bus benches, so that way they can't sleep on them. I mean, that's not the answer either.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of money not being spent well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't.
There's a lot of money being spent to hide them from us,
right,
but not to give them any help or the resources that they need.